Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Essay. Today we are gonna see, what if Essay was bored with life part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. 6 years ago. The clattering of keys echoed throughout the dark room. Essay typed away on his keyboard, scrolling up and down the webpage. Numerous tabs were seen on the screen, some of which had titles in esoteric languages. Every night since the fire, and everything that entailed afterwards was exactly like this night. Being soulless had some perks that Essay didn't even realize. There was really no need to sleep, no need to eat, and no feeling. The last part he didn't really have when he had his soul, so not really a new occurrence. But no sleep. That is another 8 hours of time to himself, time to perfect himself. So he did what any other soulless psychopathic child would do. Surf the web and the dark web looking for magical books and artifacts. And did he find some things unrelated to the task? Snuff films, pornographic films, terrorism films. But when he wasn't doing that, he was actively looking for materials to enhance himself and his skills. Whatever basic spellcasting abilities the devil had given him were not to his satisfaction, so he trained. Norse, Hindu, Greek, nature, Mayan magic. Even no magics like senjutsu and the use of kai were searched for. Didn't matter what it was. If Essay could find it, he would practice it. Over and over again in his head until it was perfect. Because that is what magic is, just the manipulation of energy within or around you. Whether it be through with words, rituals, or pictures, all magic was fundamentally the same, with everyone putting a different spin on things. Magic was just formulae designed to bend the world to your whims, to do what should be physically impossible. Combine that with science, and you have the root of all knowledge. Essay wanted it all. Magic. Science. Knowledge. All of it. You know what they say, practice makes perfect. And with an extra 8 hours of nothing, there is plenty of practice. Issei Hyoudou left the library. The librarian was really surprised at the books that he left on the table. After all, seeing a 10-year-old boy take out advanced organic chemistry, introduction to calculus, and Nietzsche would be something to say the least. Masako Fujiwara knew little of the boy who frequented her library consistently for the better part of 3 years. She never held an extended conversation with him, only brief interactions when he was returning or checking out a book. His face, so young, was never seen smiling during his time in her library. He was quiet, reserved, and polite in the few instances of staff interaction. After school let out, she would see him at her library, picking out 3 or so books before sitting down at the exact same table, every single time. No noise would come from the table except the flipping of pages. These books would not have been out of place for a college student or a CEO, yet a 10-year-old was reading them from cover to cover. Her heart warmed as she saw the books left on the table as he got up and left the library. What a smart boy. It dawned on Issei at that particular moment in kendo class. The words of his instructor rang in his ears, and then, everything clicked. Time slowed down, the gears in his head working in overdrive. He figured it out. The meaning of life. Dutation, the immovable mind. Nietzsche, the Übermensch. Mein Kampf by Hitler. It all made sense to him. He knew his purpose in life. Mother, I'm home. Issei said, opening the door to his house. He rested his kendo gear against the wall as he locked the door. 4, 3, 2, 1. Demon boy. His mother shrieked, charging at Issei with a butcher's knife in her hand. Issei simply looked on with bored eyes, dodging his mother's hysterical slashes at his face by narrowly sliding his body out of the way. He wasn't fazed by this anymore, if at all. Ever since the incident, as Issei called it, his mother was delusional. She really thought that a demon killed her husband and corrupted her son. The police and child services thought she was insane, as did many of her close friends and co-workers. She tried to attacking Issei every time he got back home from kendo practice. The keyword being tried, as she failed miserably every single time. He dodged underneath one swing and punched his mother in the stomach. He pulled his punches, not wanting to permanently damage his mother's internal organs. Falling to her knees in pain, she didn't realize that Issei had somehow got a set of pills in his hand. Kicking the knife away, he brought her to her feet. Mother, you haven't taken your medicine today and are delirious. He said calmly, shoving the pills in her mouth and punching her in the stomach with the other arm. She swallowed the pills as Issei muttered a quick chant. There, you'll feel better. She collapsed to the ground. Issei simply stepped over her and walked up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, he called out. I'll be in my room if you need me. Issei knew exactly why he did it. He wanted to see how it felt. It felt exactly the way that he thought it would be. Nothing. He felt nothing at the sight of the dead body in front of him. He felt nothing as he strangled the life out of the unfortunate 20-something-year-old woman who crossed his path that night in the park. He planned it out for a day, taking the necessary precautions of wearing gloves and making sure that there were no cameras in the immediate area. It just happened that Misaka Kishi, a student at the nearby university on her way home from class, crossed when no one else but him were there. Sucks for her. The Butcher of Kuo. A bloodthirsty killer that haunted Kuo for almost 2 years. 27 bodies found. No pattern or motive for any of them. Strangulation, blunt force trauma, stabbing, burning alive. Young, old, man, woman, rich, poor. The 27 were found in different places. Some brazenly left in the park, others in a dumpster, and one found hanging from a lamppost. Issei smirked as he read the headline. He learned well, taking note from serial killers such as Richard Ramirez, Ted Bundy, and Wayne Williams among others. 27th victim found headless. And those were the ones that they found. There were plenty of others that didn't see the light of a morgue. Mostly non-humans, but there were the few humans that Issei wanted to keep for further experimentation. There was no way that he would willingly pass up a chance at a biopsy of a non-human organism. First it was a foolish kitsune that decided to wander into Kuo, then it was a vampire. Soon, many more followed, several being bagged up and brought to the laboratory. Kitsune, vampire, werewolf, ghoul, angel, fallen angel, devil, grim reaper. They all proved valuable in one way or another. Confirming existing weaknesses and resistances to certain items, testing new hypotheses on them, or just seeing what the inside of their bodies looked like. It was enlightening, getting information from their screams or their bodies. Issei learned a lot, more than any book on the supernatural could have ever taught him. 4 years ago. Issei knew it the first time he laid eyes on him. He realized that they were the alike, same in power and stature. A small part of Issei, the irrational part that he hadn't fully mastered at the time, became annoyed at Cao Cao's offer to join his hero faction. The extremely idealistic notions of justice, sense of duty towards humanity, made Issei roll his eyes. The atmosphere was tense, with Cao Cao pointing his true long-eyeness at the soulless boy. Issei on the other pointed a heavily modified black handgun at the Chinese youth. We are all inherently bound by the bonds of human worthlessness. The weakness that subjugates the masses, and only the strongest break. Once we've broken the bonds of what makes us human, what are we? I'd say we are God and man, the creator trapped in his best, or worst depending on who you ask, creation. You and I Cao Cao, we're different than the rest of them. Cao Cao pondered Issei's words, a frown on his face. And what are we? We are simply just blessed humans, born with the power to help our fellow man against the supernatural. Issei looked at him, a blank look on his face. He shook his head, a small smile appearing on his face. It was a twisted smile, one devoid of any kindness or humanity in it. Once you've discarded the crutch called morality, you unlock who you truly are. Most are wild beasts, tamed only by the arbitrary constructs of modern society, which prevents their primal instincts from acting out. But people like us, we're the tamers, those to rule over all of them. Why do you subscribe yourself to an antiquated notion of justice, Cao Cao? Why not simply accept what you are? What we are? And what am I then to say? We are the Übermensch. An evolved better humanity. Now, I'm not an idealist like you Cao Cao, great powers and great responsibilities bullshit. I fully intend on living my life as a superior to all with all the benefits that entail. Man, devil, angel, monster, gods. I've surpassed them all. Issei moved one eye at the stray devil corpse, the other eye firmly trained on the other human. Make no mistake Cao Cao, I will never believe you and your ideals. That being said, we do not need to be enemies. I won't join your little hero club or whatever you call it, but maybe we can help each other out. Issei crouched down, dragging one finger on the corpse. Looking at Cao Cao, he sighed. Our goals intersect, temporarily at the moment now. You want to rid the world of the supernatural, I kill supernatural among many other things. I know you know of what I've done, the 27 of those humans. Issei stood up and extended out his arms to the side as if he was crucified. Go ahead, strike me down right now. Kill me right now, avenge them if you so wish or makes you feel any better. He closed his eyes. Several moments passed, Issei smiled, putting the pistol into his waistband. He then opened his eyes and stared at the Chinese youth, who pointed his spear at the ground. See, I knew you were pragmatic. Call it a vice that murder is funny to me, but I am effective at killing the supernatural. A little revenge here isn't worth knocking me out of the game now. You're insane. Cao Cao said calmly, glaring at the boy. Issei shook his head. I detest that, Cao Cao. Insanity implies a lack of control over actions. I'm perfectly lucid and in control of my facilities. You can call me evil all you want, but you can be as wrong as you'd like as well. Good, bad, kind, evil, all constructs of the world we live in. They hold no greater meaning other than as a cross to bear. Issei simply looked at Cao Cao with pitying eyes. Are you going to say that you are going to change me, Cao Cao? I am what I am, and I've accepted that. Issei paused, this conversation going nowhere. I'll see you around I guess. A magic circle appeared under Issei, illuminating the otherwise dark forest. Wait. How will I find you? Cao Cao called out. Within the gold circle, Issei simply threw him a sideways glance. I should congratulate you on figuring the murders and finding out it was me when Japan's top detectives couldn't. He looked down as the circle's light started to shine. You found me once, you'll be able to do it again. Issei mockingly bowed as the circle became complete. I know that our paths will cross again, oh ally of justice Cao Cao. We'll see each other soon, I'm sure of it. Issei pondered on the decision, the pen in his hand. The piece of paper in front of him, all he needed was a signature. It would be simply easier to just kill her, frame it as an accidental overdose or a suicide. He wondered was it a small part of him, an ever so small piece of his ever-shrinking humanity, that prevented him from doing the easy thing. His mind offered reasons to keep her alive as the two conflicting thoughts battled in his head. There are spells that require a living relative to perform. She could be used against him with such a spell. Her death could attract attention. It'd be a one-time thing with the attention subsiding. She gave birth to him. Not worthy of praise, she did what all biologically healthy women are capable of. He looked at the pen in his hand and at the title of the paper. Self-commitment to voluntary confinement at Sugamo Mental Health Facility. He made his decision as he signed the paper. Signature. Sachiko Hyoudou. Cao Cao found him and knows of what he did. Issei wasn't completely sure of the Chinese boy's intentions, but he didn't trust him. And he was compromised as the butcher of Kuo. It was time for him to leave. But this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Issei pondered leaving Japan for some time, feeling stagnant there. It was too crowded, too limited in what he could do and learn. There were only so many things that could be sent through the mail or over the web to him. It was time for a change of scenery, one that would allow him to get all the knowledge. But where would one get as much knowledge as possible? Issei smiled as he heard the captain's voice on the intercom. All passengers welcome aboard Japan Airlines Flight 0412, direct from Tokyo to New York City. Thus began the start of a new chapter in Issei Hyoudou's life. His eyes opened. He was brought out of his meditation and got up. Issei walked outside, the barrier alerting him of Ria's Gremory's arrival. What is this place? She asked. Issei simply looked at the building, a warehouse just outside of town and one of Issei's many homes. To the naked eye, it would appear to be just another old factory, but to the supernatural, this place was heavily guarded with wards, allowing no one in or out with permission. It's a little place I stay in. Anyways, you should be feeling a bit tired when you get inside. It is normal, just a side effect of the wards. Issei halted just outside of the door. You didn't alert anyone of this, right? No, they don't know I'm here. Issei unlocked the door and walked in, Ria's following slowly behind him. Issei stood in front of a podium, a thing covered up by a grey tarp behind him. There were 3 occupied seats in front of him. Walburga, Cao Cao and Ria's were all seated away from each other, with the first 2 giving the latter a frosty glance. Issei banged the gavel and cleared his throat. Well, since we have a newcomer, I'll reiterate the rules of auctioning. He glanced at Cao Cao as he spoke. Well, this is an auction about a sacred gear user. You all will respect the outcome of the auction and promise to not throw a hissy fit at the result. He said, causing a sideways glance at Walburga. The German magician simply stuck her tongue out at him. Anyways, introductions. Ria's Gremory, these 2 are Cao Cao and Walburga. Cao Cao and Walburga, Ria's Gremory, although I'm sure you already know about that. Ria's perked up at the names. Cao Cao the hero of the romance of the 3 kingdoms. Never heard about the other one. Ria said, mainly for herself. Yes. Issei said, pulling the tarp from over the object. Inside of a fluid-filled capsule, Asia Argento was suspended. Ria's gasped as Issei glanced in her direction. Knowing what she was about to say, he put his hand up. I know what you are about to say. What did you think this auction was about? He said with a blank expression. I thought it was going to be an actual item. Not a person. Riaz exclaimed as he shook his head. Whatever, what you should know is that there is a rare sacred gear in her. He said, pointing at Asia. Have you heard of the sacred gear Twilight Healing? Riaz put her finger to her chin and thought. Twilight Healing rolling the words off her tongue. It is a healing sacred gear. Issei nodded. It is said to be able to heal any injuries. Naturally, I haven't tested that theory out, but I will demonstrate the effects of the sacred gear to the winner of the auction. A great addition to your peerage, is it not? Riaz didn't speak, prompting Issei to commence the auction. Okay, we will begin the bidding now. What do you each have to offer? Cao Cao was the first to speak. The I Ching from the Xia dynasty. Issei nodded, silently appraising the item. Ancient Chinese shamanism from that time was hard to come by, so it was a pretty good offer. He glanced at Walburga, who stood up. Copy of Johann Reuchling's translation of Sefer Raziel Hamelech. Issei was quite content with his knowledge of Jewish magic, so he placed her bid lower than Cao Cao's in his mind. Looking at the final bidder, he saw Ria's fidget. I can get you 2 other books from the list you gave me. Issei didn't outwardly show emotion, but became happy at the development. However, the real offers were going to come. I'll throw in Lightning by Lei Gong. You will get Heinrich Agrippa's 3rd edition of Pagan Germanic Traditions of the Middle Ages. The bidding war. Alright, I must say that Ria's bid at the top. He turned to Ria's. Make it 4 and see if anyone wants to match you. Ria's clenched her fists. I'll make it 5. Cao Cao, Walburga. This is your chance to counter. He saw Cao Cao's gritted teeth and Walburga's sadistic face glaring daggers at the Grimoire heiress. Going once, twice he held the gavel in the air just in case a last-minute bid came up. Sold to Ria's Grimoire. Maybe next time, Cao Cao. Issei said, mocking the Chinese youth. Said youth simply glared at the soulless boy as he used a magic circle to teleport away. Nah, Issei. The lithe arm made its way around Issei's back and to Issei's abs. Issei frowned at the physical contact by the German magician. What? He asked, not turning around to see Walburga. Moo, it is like you don't even like me. I'm starting to think you are gay. Such is a useless feeling, love. Physical reproduction does not need to be determined with love. It is simply finding a partner with suitable genes and then engaging in coitus. She can come willingly or by force, does not matter to me. Ah, you've already done it. Her voice purred, with her hand sliding down to Issei's pants. Issei removed the hand and stepped back. Multiple times, since I was 13. He turned to face her, his face the impassive mask it usually was. Please do leave, I have a client to attend to. He said, turning around. But I have something important to tell you. Issei stopped in his tracks, not bothering to look back at the magician. Then give me a call. Congratulations, thank you for your payment. Issei looked at the 5 books on the ground, mentally dissecting everything he expected inside each. The 3 of them, Issei, Ria's, and Asia, stood in the middle of a field under the pale moonlight. Their sacred gear. Ria said flatly. Issei nodded. You want a demonstration? He turned around, his back towards Ria's. Have you heard rumors of a sacred gear extractor in limited use by the fallen angels? I have. I don't believe it though. The balance of power would shift too much to the fallen angels, something we and the angels won't tolerate. Issei laughed a humorless laugh. I haven't seen it, but they are second to the party. He turned, staring the Grimoire girl in the eyes. I have devised a method of extraction of sacred gears, leaving the host intact. Ria's gasped, her eyebrows up. That's impossible. Lord Beelzebub has tried that for years and has failed. Not to mention the various other factions trying the same thing. Issei shook his head. You all are very intelligent, millennia upon millennia of time. Yet, you haven't figured it out. He stared at Ria's face. He tilted his head, his face looking at the ground. Separating souls from sacred gears. Child's play with the right books, different applications of conventional spells, and a large dose of psychedelic drugs which I allowed to work. Lots of dragons, but they give you good information. He laughed out. I do believe that Sauna will not hear of my occasional dabbling in substances that might land me in Japanese prison forever. Ria's nodded. Issei sighed. I do believe that I am getting ahead of myself. He materialized a wooden stake in his left hand and without warning, stabbed it through his right hand. He made no sound while Ria shrieked at the bloody sight. He turned his head at the nun, who was under a mind control spell, and she started walking towards him. She crouched down, removing the stake and then placing both of her hands over the wound. A green light appeared over the wound, closing it up. Her eyes were lifeless the entire process, her mouth aged. Thank you, Asia. He said while looking at the Grimoire heiress. That proof enough? Yes. That is quite fine. Ria said, looking like she was going to vomit. Now, getting back to what I was saying before. I can remove her sacred gear, it comes with a price though. Or you can keep her as is and do whatever you want with her. I'll take her as she is. Issei pondered the hypocrisy on that statement but didn't mention anything. Since the challenge was accepted and will start on Monday, let me ask you something. How far are you willing to go ensure your victory? He asked, staring at her eyes. He saw her eyes waver in determination for a minute but then became steady. I'll do everything it takes. Even if it means risking everything you love. Your peerage. What do you mean by that? He heard the momentary fear in her voice. As I mentioned before, I can separate sacred gears from their users. What good is a sacred gear in the wild, other than denying access to your enemies? Sure, it is good, but it is even better if you can implant them in yourself. Does that mean you can? Yes, I can implant sacred gears in your peerage. He looked Ria straight in the face. There are some things I need to tell you as you consider this though. I'm telling you this not because I believe in honor or anything, but more as you know what you get, so you can't try to kill me when something inevitably happens. He continued. Tinkering around with them is very interesting. The big man made them well, I admit. Once you've removed them from the soul, they become unstable for a lack of a better term. If you pair them with an incompatible soul, things can happen. Bad things to say the least. Insanity, implosion, spontaneous combustion. Call it the man's failsafe. On the bright side, if compatible, you can use them. They just degrade faster. Not as strong as they could be, and their uses are relatively limited. It pisses me off that I can't figure out why. Issei mentioned this as casually as if he was talking about the weather. Ria's had an incredulous look on her face as she heard everything. Are you crazy? I'm not going to do that to my peerage. Ria's yelled out. Issei shrugged his shoulders before putting a palm up. Calm down, I'm simply offering up options to you. That being said, it is your choice. No. Ria said, firmly. Issei nodded. I respect your decision. Issei glanced at Asia, who collapsed on the ground. I've released a mind control spell on her and she should awake within a few hours. He squatted down, grabbing all the books. A bright yellow magic circle began to form under him. Well, enjoy your new purchase. I'll see you Monday morning for training. As Issei read the first book that Riaz gave him, his phone rang. The darkness of the room made the screen of the phone shine that much brighter as Issei let it ring several times. Knowing who called him, he put the phone to his ear without a thought. Hey, are you free from that bitch now? Volberga continued in her sing-song voice. You know, I always took you for a Yandir. Anyways, what was so important earlier? He heard Wilburga's laugh over the phone before an eerie silence came over the line. Issei was about to answer when the German magician spoke. Do you want to help start the end of the world? 4 years ago. Starting a new life in a foreign country can be a new experience. Starting it in one of the biggest city's worst neighborhoods is downright nerve-wracking. Starting it as a minority from a different country is downright insane. Issei is not insane, however, everything he does is part of a greater plan. Low income, high crime rate area. A perfect place for him to hone his skills. Kuo was too hot for him now, so he needed to expand his horizons. America was in his sights for a long time anyways, so it became the perfect time. It was easier than expected. The first day at the middle school he attended, he didn't need to do anything. Just dress up in the Japanese-style school uniform and watch everyone snicker and whisper about you. Yo ace. Issei ignored the Hispanic student. Said student, who wore a yellow jersey, didn't take so kindly to being ignored by the new student and stood in front of the Japanese boy. Hey bitch, you're new around here, so you best learn the rules is. Issei simply grinned. Whatever, spick. Issei spat in his face. A collective gasp was heard in the hallways as everyone struggled to comprehend what just happened. Fuck you. The boy pulled out a switchblade and tried to stab at the Japanese boy, who simply dodged. Issei then grabbed the wrist and twisted it, causing the wannabe gangbanger to drop it. Issei then kicked the legs out from underneath him before giving a good stomp to the prone boy's face. Issei calmly picked up a switchblade and put it in his backpack before moving through the crowd of parting students. The students were in shock at what happened and a general feeling of pity overcame the boy. Issei thought it was cute that they thought he would be in danger as he walked to his first period class. That's him. Issei knew he was in luck. The same boy he beat up today was part of a gang, the Kings or something like that. Issei didn't bother to learn the names of the gangs, just needed to know who controls what and who is in charge. He lingered outside of his low-income, subsidized apartment complex, knowing what did earlier in the day had spread quickly around. He saw the bodega store owner give him pitying looks, as well as shifty-looking people occasionally looking his way as he simply sat down on the bench. The sun had long set and darkness descended on the land. The dim light in front of the apartment complex flickered on and off, but Issei could see the 5 people approaching him. They wore bright yellow shirts, had bandanas on their heads, and unpleasant expressions on their faces. Issei stood up and put his palm up as the 5 Hispanic men approached him. Let's not waste time on pleasantries. I pissed up off and you want my head. Let's just fight. Issei remarked, hitting the largest one with a jab to the stomach and a kick to the kneecap before finishing up with an elbow to the back of the head as he fell down. As the 4 other charged at him with switchblades, he took out the one he confiscated earlier and held it. Ducking underneath the wild swings of a gang member, he plunged his knife into the gangbanger's face. Spinning the screaming gangster around, he took the gangbanger's knife and threw it at another's throat, landing right on target. Pulling his knife out of his second victim's head, he looked at the remaining 2. The 2 were scared, he could see that, but they held their ground. Come on, I'll give you a fighting chance then. He said, dropping his knife and kicking it over towards them. He then rushed at the two, focusing on the one he beat up this morning. Grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back, the gangbanger screamed in pain as Issei cranked it even further. Betting twirled around, the gangbanger was stabbed by his friend as Issei cracked a small smile. Pushing the stabbed gangmember to the side, Issei grabbed part of the remaining gangmember's throat and pulled back, ripping out part of his throat and spewing blood everywhere. The gangmember collapsed to the ground, clutching his throat. Issei just kicked the guy in the head and then stomped on it twice for good measure. Issei took a step back and surveyed his work before walking back inside his apartment. "So, you're the guy who took out the kings?" Johnny Mazzini said skeptically, looking at the Japanese boy in front of him. Said boy simply nodded as he looked around. "Who the hell are you? We've been trying to do that for years and you just show up and take them out." "My name is Kaisu Kanehara from Japan. They simply annoyed me and they had to pay the price," Kaisuke said, chuckling. Kaisuke had been walking to his house from school when several Italian-American gentlemen approached him. As he readied for a fight, the leader stood to him in a polite way, asking if he would meet their leader. They took him to a crack house on the outskirts of the city and lead him inside to see the boss, Johnny Mazzini, also known as Radog. Radog was a veteran of the late gang wars of the 80s and is in his 50s now. Though he wasn't as skinny as he once was, he was still formidable as he was in his youth. He's seen many things in his life and knew when someone was telling the truth or lying. It was a skill he developed while surviving on the hard streets and something he perfected during the mafia crackdown on crime during the late 90s. He knew the New York City underground crime scene like the back of his hand, so it perplexed him when an unknown player had suddenly popped out of nowhere and killed off his major rivals in the course of a few weeks. He was thankful of course, but he needed to know if this new player was hostile or not, so he ordered his men to find this new player and bring him to him. What he wasn't expecting was a young Asian teenage boy, dressed in the clothes that characters would wear in that anime stuff his grandchildren watch. He looked at the boy skeptically, up and down before speaking again. "So Kaisuke, why are you here?" he asked politely. He knew when to be polite and when to not be, no need to anger a potential ally in the future. Kaisuke simply shrugged before putting a finger on his chin. "I moved here to be with my uncle, who is sickly," Kaisuke said simply. Radog looked at him, sensing no hint of deception. "And you go to school?" "I have to, do I not?" "Why did you kill all of them?" "They wouldn't let me take their money." Radog chuckled at Kaisuke's response. "I like you kid. I don't say that very often." Radog stood up and walked around. Kaisuke followed him with his eyes as Radog stared at a painting. It was a painting of the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus hanging up on his wall. "What do you think about being an associate of us?" "I refuse." Radog looked at the boy, who held up a palm. "I'm flattered, but I don't work well with others." The boy stood up. "But I do think we can come to an understanding. I don't want to be enemies with you. We stay out of each other's way, and we should be fine. As long as I can do what I want, we will be on good terms." "And what do you want?" Kaisuke paused. A small, but sociopathic smile appeared on his face. Johnny unconsciously took a step back. It was a smile he's seen far too often, a smile of the psychopaths and murderers he's crossed paths with in his life. Men with no conscience, men who live for nothing. To see it in someone so young, he shuddered to think of how evil he is. "I just want to kill some people." Schwarzwald. The Black Forest in Germany. The birthplace of German mythology and location heavily featured in the Grimm's fairy tales, this heavily forested area is lived in by wildlife, hunters, and magicians. Wait, magicians. Exenict, a group of stray magicians of mostly German or Nordic heritage, has their headquarters over here. A few hundred meters from the cabin used as the headquarters, Issei strolled down the beaten path. The night of the half moon was still visible, even underneath the canopy of the trees. The magical presence here was very powerful and pure. He imagined hundreds of years before, witches eating children and before that, pagans conducting rituals under this very moon. Issei felt the dark magical aura of the Rathos as Walburga called it getting closer to him. He frankly thought it was a stupid name as it could not be called red, nor a house. As he entered the clearing out of the forest, the Rathos became visible. Surrounded by a deep gorge with only a rickety suspension bridge hanging over the deep chasm, the brown cabin stood across from him, with the owner of the house standing in front. Piercing at him through the darkness, Walburga's golden eyes met his. "Welcome Issei," she said with a cheerful smile, her arms outstretched. Thunder echoed in the background as the night sky suddenly darkened. Issei glanced up before leveling his passive gaze at the woman. "We have much to discuss, no?" Issei sat across from the German magician, showing no visible reaction to her. The magician told the soulless boy that she needed to get comfortable for him. Issei honestly expected something like the outfit she wore, a simple and extremely risque black one-piece nightgown. The two sat in silence in the dark room, staring at each other across the narrow table. The interior of the cabin was far more spacious than the outside would suggest, with the only room resembling a castle dining room. "Boo, you're so boring." She pouted, swirling a glass of red wine in her right hand. Issei ignored the outburst, his eyes showing no emotion. "So, the end of the world, you say?" Wahlberg broke into a smile at his words. Not a regular smile, but a narrow smile that sociopaths would put on. "Say, what do you know about Excalibur?" she asked, sipping some of her wine. Issei paused, recounting the story of Excalibur in his head. The sword of King Arthur, which was shattered and scattered among the Christian churches. Wahlberg's smile grew even narrower, her eyes glittering. "Rumor has it that some of the fragments were stolen from the factions of the church. Heard whispers that it was the fallen angels." Issei rose his eyebrows at this. I expected the churches to have better security." Issei murmured, taking a sip of his wine. "Not bad, harvested a bit early but aged well. Any ideas on the culprits?" Wahlberg giggled. "I don't really know, you'll have to give me something in exchange." "It was your idea to invite me to the end of the world." Issei reminded her flatly. "I did I not?" Wahlberg put a finger to her chin, her eyes looking up as if in thought. In the blur, Wahlberg was placed against the wall, her feet off the floor. Issei had a hand on her throat, his eyes still holding no emotion. Wahlberg took a sip of her wine from the glass which was still in her hand before looking at his eyes. "Either spit it out or don't bother me if you don't want to share. I'm not here to play games, Wahlberg." Alright, put me down." Issei complied, vaguely annoyed at Wahlberg's coyness. "I don't know, I'm tracking down leads right now." She headed back to her seat. She tapped her fingers on the wooden table. Ever heard the name Valper Galilei? Arranged priest, human experimentation guy. Issei sat down. Wahlberg nodded at his words. Tracking him down. It isn't a stretch to think that with his holy sword knowledge and excommunication that he would seek shelter with the fallen. And now the Excalibur fragments go missing. Too much of a coincidence. Issei nodded at the German magician's words. He disliked her antics, but could admit that she was very intelligent when the time required. "Let's say all this is true." Issei emphasized the word true. Then what? How is a little spat between some angels going to kickstart the end of the world? Wahlberg wagged her finger at him, clicking her tongue. "This is only part 1 of 2. The bigger surprise is downstairs." Wahlberg got up and walked to the wall. Placing her palm on the stone, a blue magical circle expanded, causing that section of the wall to move like a door. A spiral staircase was seen, only illuminated by the torches on the wall. Issei stood up and walked behind Wahlberg down the stairs. The winding staircase was fit for a medieval castle, ambience and all. At the bottom of the stairs, he heard moaning in the direction that Wahlberg was walking towards. Moving in the damp darkness, he turned to see numerous people imprisoned behind bars in the dungeons. Most of the people were extremely emaciated and had numerous scars on their bodies. Issei knew of Wahlberg's hobbies as it was how they met, though Issei liked to think that he put his torturing phase behind him. At the end of the dimly lit hallway stood a metal door. Snapping her fingers, a key appeared into Wahlberg's free hand and she inserted it in the keyhole. A blue magical circle pulsed from the lock and a clicking sound was heard. Wahlberg pushed the door open and in the darkness the two went. "This, can you see?" She clapped, illuminating the room with torches. In the center of the room was a beautiful girl, held up on a crucifix. She was bound by metal chains, her face hidden by her unkempt blonde hair. Issei narrowed his eyes at the girl. "The vampire?" No way." Issei looked at her incredulously. He focused his eyes, getting a feel for her aura. Sacred gear. Longinus level. Wahlberg couldn't contain her laughter at Issei's words or face. She could only count on one hand the amount of times she has seen him get flustered. "It is the Sephiroth Graal." Issei's eyes widened more than they already were. "The Holy Grail, this vampire has it. The power over the very essence of life." Issei remarked calmly, getting over the shock of another Longinus class sacred gear here. He looked back at Wahlberg. "Now, I'd ask how you got her, but I really don't want to know." Wahlberg giggled at his words. Has she materialized it yet?" Wahlberg's cat-like grin grew even bigger as she put down her now empty glass of wine. A black magical circle appeared and in a fog of mist, a golden chalice appeared in her hand. "And, so. Here is the Sephiroth Graal. Tada." She waved it around in front of Issei's face. "And? What do you want me to do with it?" "It is already out of her body. I want you to find out the balance breaker and any subspecies of this thing. We know that base Longinus are already powerful, let's see how much more powerful this can get." "So what is in it for me?" Wahlberg simply grinned at Issei's question. "Depending on what it is, you can have it." Issei paused. He was sure he heard that correctly, his enhanced hearing made sure of that. He is sure that he wasn't in an alternate reality where Wilburga isn't a cunning sociopathic woman, and he is sure that he is still sane. He said the only word that came into his mind. What? Wilburga laughed out at Issei's dumbstruck face. I say what I mean and I mean what I say. I already have enough power with the incinerate anthem and don't need any more. I am also not going to sell this like you two. Call it giving an old friend a reason to help her end the world. Issei pondered her words. He thought about saying something, but he knew that he would get nowhere with Wilburga's constant redirections. Also, she might change her mind about him receiving it, so it was best to act now. Issei remembered the proverb of the gift horse in the mouth and shrugged his shoulders. Alright. Dottie sighed out. Give me a few hours or so. I'll figure this out. Wilburga watched curiously as Issei did his work. She remembered the first time she saw him, that vampire thing in New York, she knew he was the one. His way around the blade made her heart flutter, as did his skill with magic. His magical ability was better than hers, as much as the German hated to admit it. There was something about his magic, it wasn't flashy nor elaborate. It was simple, but simple was all it took to sweep her off her feet. The screams of the vampire in front of her made the magician smile. All of her pain, she relished in seeing others hurt. Whether it be at the point of a blade or with magic, Issei knew how to figure out how something works. Now I think I understand how this plays out. It took a while to sever her link to her sacred gear, but I did it and found out how this works. Issei spoke for the first time in an hour or so. He turned around, a rare happy smile on his face. In his palm, the Sephiroth Graal floated, suspended in an invisible field that prevented it from succumbing to gravity. The balance breaker of this, it can bring only be used once. Killing yourself, it is the self-sacrifice of Jesus. You die, so that others may live and live forever. The floating chalice became a shining gold as it rotated around. Hundreds upon hundreds of different colored magical circles covered the chalice, each pulsating its color. The subspecies of this, it's magnificent. The chalice started to whirl around, spinning so that it appeared as a blur. From the blur, two pieces of the chalice broke off and became suspended in air. The broken pieces started to form into a chalice as the original repaired itself. The magical circles produced a white mist, encircling all of the chalices before fading away. 3 grails. Wilburga was speechless at this. Not 1, not 2, but 3. 3 holy grails, each hovering in front of Issei. All of the grails were golden, but each emitted a different color. The one on the left emitted a green light, the middle a black light, and the right a white light. From what I've gathered, this one, Issei said, gesturing to the left grail, has control over the principles of life. Everything about how the soul in life is made. Strengths, weaknesses, changes, all inside of here. Going to the middle one, he continued. The control over the principles of death. You can talk with the dead with this, even angels and devils who go to nothingness after their death. Staring blankly at the last one, Wilburga couldn't want to hear his explanation. The power over nothingness. The power over the void, that which is neither life or death. Issei finished, grabbing the middle and left ones. The right one floated over to Wilburga, who grasped it in her hand. Issei still had the kind smile on his face as he walked closer to Wilburga. Now, I thought it wouldn't be fair for me to have all of it. Issei looked straight into Wilburga's eyes. Her heart skipped a beat as he put his face within inches of hers. You never did tell me how all this had to do with stolen Excalibur fragments. Wilburga examined the chalice in her hand, a giddy look on her face, before glancing back at the soulless teen. It is quite simple. If the fallen really are behind it, something big must be happening. I say we see what happens and what the fallen plan. Issei thought about her words. They made sense enough, but there was a nagging thought in his head. You do realize this might be a whole lot of nothing, right? It could just be an insider dealing arms or some idiot losing accountability when taking storage. He glanced at the chalices in both of his hands. Also, I fail to see how the Sephiroth Graal has anything to do with this. It is a gut feeling, trust me. Trust and Wilburga don't go together, but Issei continued to listen to her words. And this. She pointed at her chalice and the ones held by Issei. This is power over everything. If this happens to be nothing, we will make it something. If it happens to actually be something, less work for us, right? Issei shrugged his shoulders at Wilburga's logic. He cracked a small smile at this. I guess you are right. Anyways, how long will this take? Wilburga's eyes became malicious. A sneer became etched on her face. Issei rose his eyebrows at this. Is it that Gremory girl? I don't understand why you'll help her with her raiding game, even though she'll be dead soon. Issei shot a frosty glare at the German. Some of us have a sense of honor. When it suits you, of course. Issei ignored the jab. Truthfully told, I need to see if my strategies work against Phoenix and his regeneration. Sure, having theories on what should work is good, but having a useful guinea pig is even better. And I'm not going to do it myself. He shrugged his shoulders. Wahlberg simply sighed. Well, I'll contact you when I find out who is behind these thefts. I'll be expecting your call in the underworld then. Issei glanced curiously at the longinus in his hands. He then looked at the German magician with a face that can only be described as curious. I do wonder what will happen with 2 longinus class sacred gears occupying one host. Wahlberg shot him a nasty look. I'm not your guinea pig. Her angry face immediately turned into a sultry look. Though I can be your. Issei held up his hand, causing the German to pout. We're not going over that again. He sighed. I suppose that I should anchor this to myself. It'll make it much more convenient to use, not to mention more secure. Hundreds of magical circles, each with esoteric symbols in different colors, emerged from the chalices and began to spin around the soulless boy. A gust of wind blew through the dungeon as Issei began trapped within a yellow sphere. The sphere began to pulse and levitate as one chalice disappeared into a pocket dimension that Issei stored all his captured sacred gears. The sphere dissipated and the boy descended back to the ground. Issei rose off the ground and dusted himself off. No matter how many times I've done that, I'll never get used to that feeling. He remarked, looking at his remaining chalice. He felt the bond between the remaining chalice and the other chalice, and both with the nothingness within him. That wasn't the usual way you do it. Or did you just want to brag in front of a pretty girl? Wahlberg teased. Issei ignored her by giving her a glare. You don't seal a longinus class sacred gear the same way you do a twice critical. Wahlberg giggled hysterically as she rose her chalice up. To the end of the world? She questioned. Issei nodded, another rare smile coming over his face. He rose his remaining chalice and crossed it with the Germans. To the end of the world. Issei reviewed the footage of the rating games that Riser Phoenix had won. The 2 he lost were due to him intentionally losing, so there was no purpose to see why someone lost, only why someone wins. Be it the overwhelming power of Phoenix Fire, tactical brilliance, or the other team simply sucking, Issei needed to know why. Regardless of his views on devils, he made a deal, and he intended on keeping it. He watched the action unfold on the massive television in front of him, as well as the 2 smaller monitors next to the main one. The main one showed the main camera angle, while the others alternated between the secondary views. They allowed a complete view of the rating game battlefield, showing any strengths or weaknesses. Issei realized that any comprehensive strategy wouldn't be necessary for Rias to win versus Riser. He noticed a theme of Riser's peerage in their fights. Seemingly favoring physical combat, Riser sends all his pieces, excluding himself, his queen, and his bishops onto the main battlefield. The bomb Queen Ubeluna acts as a roving figure on the battlefield, allowing for massive amounts of explosive-based magic to be launched at certain locations. His 6 pawns and 2 rooks, with the support of the queen, go around eliminate their opponents through teamwork, often fighting 2-on-1. It was very pragmatic, Issei could respect that. Whittling down his opponents, he would then join the fray with his 2 bishops, and his entire peerage would swarm what was left of the enemies and take their king. Of course, anyone could see what he was doing, but whether they could stop him was another story. Issei paused the footage in front of him. His head throbbed, a side effect of pairing a longinus class sacred gear with his existence. He couldn't anchor it to his soul, which he didn't have, so he paired it with the void that occupied his soul. It wasn't perfect, but it did the job well enough. His skin tingled when he sealed it as he felt the very nature of his existence morphing within him as the seal became finally complete. He sat down, ignoring the headache. He focused on the task in front of him, staring at the screen as multiple strategies formed in his head. He needed to take into account the capabilities of the devils in front of him if any plan he made was to be successful. He could have used the Sephiroth Graal to figure out everyone he wanted to about the Grimoire peerage, but that would lead to more questions that Issei would very much prefer not to answer. It would have to be the old-fashioned way of learning. He sat still for 5 minutes before turning off the TV. He'd be ready to train the devils and lead them to victory. They just have to not suck. Issei impassively stared as the devils conducted their 10 laps around the track in Ria's underworld mansion. Now, there were some trainers who would have started off with something ridiculous like a 10-kilometer run or several hundred push-ups or squats, but Issei knew better. No purpose in exhausting them at the start of the training. At the end of the training, sure, but never at the start. As the last devil, Asia, completed the lap, Issei couldn't help but wonder how Rias had convinced her to accept devildom. He was pretty sure that she was just forcefully reincarnated, but he wasn't going to do anything about it, not here nor now. The devils formed in a little group in front of him. Issei looked at the ground as he paced. He was wearing a simple blue tracksuit with running shoes, much like the devils who wore workout attire. I've formed numerous strategies in my head about what to do about Riser. However, I'd naturally need to see what you all can actually do before I decide which plan is right for you. He stopped, pointing at Kiba. We are going to spar individually. I need to gauge your abilities and see how they factor into my plan. Issei said. He knew of their perceptions of him as a magician, silently chuckling. There was much more to that they didn't need to know. He would limit himself and fight completely different than he would prefer. It would be no good if your opponents could see your fighting style and your abilities while you had no backup. Let's begin. The two stood across from each other, inside of the grass field of the 400-meter track. The devils were watching from the sidelines, chanting encouragement at the night. Now, Kiba. Do whatever it takes to neutralize me. I'll do the same. He glanced at Rias. Please start the countdown. Issei focused his eyes back on the blonde in front of him. 3, 2, 1, fight. Kiba charged at Issei at a rate faster than the human eye could see, a western sword materializing in his hand. Issei picked up all of his movements as if Kiba was moving in molasses, noting the distance he had traveled in less than 2 seconds. Raising a palm up, a blue magical circle enveloped the soulless boy, spreading from Issei's feet. Invisible ice covered the circle before disappearing. Kiba rushed into where the circle had been, and his legs came out from underneath him. You're a knight, you rely on speed. He said, as Kiba regained his footing. You know how quickly you'll move in ideal conditions, perfectly warm and sun shining. Issei continued, dodging a slash at his head. Under non-ideal conditions however, you need to readjust. Wet ground, snow, quicksand, all. He ducked underneath an arc from Kiba's sword. Changed the dynamic of the fight. Issei sprang at Kiba, launching a jab to his stomach and left hook to the face before leaping a safe distance back. Kiba frowned as the ground started to quake. Issei jumped as numerous blades pierced the earth below him. Good on you. Issei said, falling back down to earth. Numerous magical circles appeared around Issei, each in a different color. When Issei hit the ground, the circles activated. Stony hands grabbed Kiba's ankles with a huge gust of wind, knocking the knight forward to the ground. He couldn't see the stump of earth that formed up in front of his head, and when he collided with it, the force knocked him unconscious. Next. Were the last words he heard before the darkness took over. The replay of the fight happened with Kaneko. Issei knew it was going to happen, but just wanted to see if she could defy fate. That is the problem with rooks and knights. All the speed in the world, but no way of hitting a target that wasn't in the immediate vicinity. To his credit though, Kaneko did start lobbing chunks of earth at him as he constantly dodged her punches. Still, it didn't do much for her as she was unconscious on the sidelines. Issei was very curious about his next challenger, the queen. He knew of her heritage, her fallen angel ability of light would do well in this fight. That said, he wasn't going to tell her he knew what she was. That would have raised more questions than Issei would like to deal with. Begin. Rias shouted. Akeno immediately chanted a lightning spell, sending lightning from the sky at Issei. Issei ducked to the side and shot a fireball at her, which she blocked with a barrier. Akeno attempted to hit Issei with her lightning, but he kept dodging the attacks. Every attack he dodged, he moved closer to her. When she noticed how close he was, she took to the skies with her devil wings. Her outfit changed, changing from a tracksuit to a Shinto shrine maiden. Issei ignored the change in outfit as he used a wind spell, generating a mini tornado with a green magic circle. Allowing himself to be caught in the tornado, he spun around at breakneck speeds inside as Akeno attempted to hit him with a water spout. Leaving at the perfect time, Issei flew out of the tornado as a bullet. Creating an earth hammer, Issei hit Akeno out of the sky and into the ground. He launched a lightning spell at the crater Akeno fell into, stunning her into unconsciousness. Issei landed on his feet in a kneeling position before he stood up, looking at the Gremory heiress. And Rias, it's your turn. Rias launched her signature power of destruction at the soulless boy. Issei watched lazily as the beam of energy made its way towards him. A few inches before it would have made contact, a massive black hole appeared in front of Issei. All the power of destruction went inside the hole before the hole closed up. A fraction of a second later, another hole appeared behind Rias. Power of destruction poured out of the hole and into Ria's back, knocking the heiress to the ground. Rias remained on the ground as the hole closed up, defeated by her own power. Alright. Issei said, walking towards Rias. Let's get you fixed up. Issei made the finishing touches on the 3D modeling software on his computer. The devils sat behind him on 2 couches, eagerly waiting for Issei. Issei hooked up his computer to the TV, the screens a perfect copy of each other. Okay, now that I've evaluated your strengths and techniques against those of Riser and his peerage, this is the best course of action. Please hold off all questions until the end. Issei said, clicking on a file that read Gremory Phoenix Fight Simulator. Out popped a 3D replica of Kuo Academy. Zooming in on the occult research club room, 5 white-colored stickman figures became visible, each wearing a labeled shirt with their names on it. Okay, I guess that you will start over here. Issei said, zooming out so that the club building was seen. I estimate that Riser will start in the student council area. Issei zoomed out, pointing at the student council room in the main building. "This is what I want you all to do." Issei clicked on a button that said play. The stick figures labeled Rias and Akeno flew outside while the other three stayed indoors. Issei paused the screen. "Okay, this is what is going to happen. Akeno and Rias, you will generate a tremendous flood over the battlefield. I want the entire forest and the school submerged in tsunami levels of water," Issei said before he pointed at the three other devils. "You three will start to dig a tunnel from your place to the school building." Issei clicked on the simulator and it worked as Issei said. A flood of water became visible, slowly moving over the landscape while a tunnel was created from the club room to the main building. Issei clicked on the simulator, pausing it as the flood hit the school. He then scrolled over to the student council building, making visible 16 black stickmen, evidently Riser's peerage. Riser and Ubaluna were labeled with their names, while everyone else was what piece they were in a number. "I imagine that while this is happening, they won't be still." Issei resumed the simulator, making the Riser stickmen move. All the pawns, knights, rooks, and bishops moved. As you can see, Bishop 1 and 2 are moving away from the main area. He pointed out the bishops moving to the edge of the map while the rest of the peerage moved into the forest, which had a wave on top of it. Pawns 1 to 8, knights 1 and 2, and rooks 1 and 2. He paused the simulator, freezing the stickmen at various points in the center of the map. Will be eliminated. He zoomed to Rias and Akeno. "You two will launch lightning strikes because you know water conducts electricity." He continued the simulator as numerous lightning strikes came from Rias and Akeno. Riser's peerage vanished from the simulator as the water crackled with electricity. While this is happening, Issei scrolled underneath the map, revealing a tunnel from the club room to the main building. The Kaneko, Kiba, and Asia stickmen were inside of the main building. Now, it is 5 against 4, realistically 4 against 2. The next threat is the bomb queen, Ubaluna. Issei mentioned, zooming in on said stickman. "Jack of all trades. Phoenix Fire might be hot and immortal, but shouldn't pose an offensive threat against you. The queen is the real threat." Issei continued the simulator, all the remaining pieces minus the bishops moving around Kuo's main building. Issei paused again. "Rias and Asia will be on Riser. Rias, you'll engage him with long-distance magic, while Asia will provide support and the occasional potshot at him. Do not, and I repeat, do not get close to him." Issei continued the simulator, zooming in on the moving Riser, Rias, and Asia stickmen. The stickmen were launching spells at each other, with none hitting. Issei scrolled over to the other stickmen. Kaneko and Kiba were engaged in close combat with Ubaluna, with Akeno hovering nearby. "As you can see, you three will gang up on Ubaluna. Due to her explosive abilities, I want you to stay close enough to attack her, but far enough from a suicidal explosion, should she choose to do that." Resuming the simulation, the peerage watched as the stickman versions of them continued attacking the Phoenix peerage. All of the suddenly, the simulation popped up a message in flashing red letters, "Victory." "As you can see, this will end in your victory. Your numbers will overwhelm the Phoenix peerage through exhaustion at the end." He turned off the simulation behind him and put his computer into sleep mode. "Any questions?" Kiba's hand popped up. "How do you know that they will move forward?" Footage from all of the previous matches shows an aggressive assault built around surrounding and overwhelming with superior numbers. Use that against them. Don't you think they will adjust their strategy when we send a tsunami at them? Rias piped up. Issei put his chin on a finger as he paced in front of the now blank screen. Honestly, no. He seems arrogant enough to deal with water, no matter the amount. It'd sting his pride as a phoenix to be deterred by water. What if he doesn't do this? Akeno asked. I have multiple contingencies in plan that I will share with Rias. This is the main plan that should be utilized as it is the most efficient use of your energy. Issei remarked simply. So what do we do now then? Train this strategy until the game comes? Rias asked, crossing her arms under her bust. No. Issei waved his hands dismissively. That'd be a waste of time. Knowing the strategy is one thing, being able to do it is another. Your skills are generally lacking. He ignored the sour looks from the peerage. It will be individual skills training for the better part of the month, then group training which will deal specifically with the game at hand. Issei clapped his hands, causing the screen behind him to come back to life. As you can see, here is the schedule of your training. Issei paused to let the peerage see the structured day he prepared. If there are no more questions, you are dismissed. He walked out of the room, but stopped just in front of the doorway. Rest up, you'll need it. Issei watched as Rias and Akeno generated a wave of water far larger than Kuo Academy and sent it crashing into the forest. A vague sense of satisfaction came into his mind, but not enough to show anything. They improved, far more than he would have expected. Over the course of the month, they've proven themselves to be hard workers and immensely skilled as well. Ria's and Akeno's magical reserves have gone up tremendously, Kiba became even better at sword fighting, Kaneko got stronger, and Asia isn't totally useless anymore. The devils proved themselves to him during the training, and to him, they've been upgraded from the scum of the earth to bugs. A small improvement, but an improvement nonetheless. Now. Ria shouted as they both generated large amounts of lightning and threw them down at the pool of water. The electricity crackled as it hit the water, causing sparks to become visible. My work here is done. Issei muttered to himself, grudgingly impressed. It went exactly as he planned. He knew it would. Riser Phoenix and his peerage were just too inflexible to change to the tactics he taught Rias. Their frontal assault plan became their downfall when they lost nearly 70% of their pieces just with the tidal wave. The Gremory peerage impressed him with the speed at which they built their tunnel underneath the school. Getting caught off guard didn't hinder Riser as much as he thought it would, and he saw that the Phoenix had some skill with fire. There were several key takeaways the soulless boy got from the fight with Yubaluna and Riser. The king and queen were both highly skilled but had endurance issues. They rely heavily on Phoenix tears to heal damage inflicted on them. Isolating them deprives them of their teamwork. In the end, it was Akeno and Ria's whittling down Riser's endurance after Yubaluna blew herself up, taking along Kiba, Kaneko, and Asia. The two devils alternated elemental attacks on the Phoenix, when one used water, the other used lightning. Chunks of earth were combined with blades of wind. Rias used her famed power of destruction well on Riser, hitting him from multiple directions. Issei found the weakness of the Phoenix from the video of the raiding game. While having close to absolute regeneration, it doesn't matter if you are exhausted and can barely fight. Riser sighed, panting for air. Surrender. Issei paused the tape at that point. A buzzing of his phone caught his attention. Funny how fate decides to act. Volberga. Took you long enough. He said flatly. The German magician simply groaned. I'd start off with a hello, how are you? I've been fine, thank you for asking about how my day was as well. Whatever, just tell me the news. Issei remarked, not caring about the magician's words. Moo, can't you at least pretend to care? She pouted. I don't need pretenses with you, Volberga. We both know what the other wants. No need for useless pleasantries. Alright, Volberga huffed. It took a while, but I have a lead. She paused for a few moments. Say, what do you know of the Angel of the Stars, Cacabiel? Cacabiel. Mentioned in the Book of Enoch as one of the Watchers who fell from heaven, the Grigori. Name rings a bell. One of the few remaining 10 winged fallen who survived the Great War. Volberga confirmed Issei's words. All the information I have leads back to him. They weren't willing to talk to a pretty girl at first, but then they told me everything. Issei knew exactly what that meant. Somewhere in some dingy place, there was something severely tortured, he was sure of it. I'm not going to ask who, but I believe you. That's the trust I've been waiting for. How does Valper fit in with Cacabiel then? Issei asked. He's working with him. Probably trying to rebuild the Excalibur. Issei followed along with Volberga's words. Makes sense. There are capable swordsmen in the fallen angel, Tobio Icus comes to mind, but I doubt Azazel would let him wield something blatantly stolen. That begs the question, he's rogue. Cacabiel is definitely rogue. I doubt Azazel, Barakiel, or Shemhazai know of his little side project. Interesting. Issei simply remarked, all of this information adding to the various scenarios he thought of. They wouldn't approve, of course. Azazel is too much of a researcher, Shemhazai is too busy keeping Azazel in check, and Barakiel, who knows about him anymore. That was the intelligence of Volberga that made Issei respect her. There is also one more thing which ties all of this to a bigger picture. Volberga paused for a dramatic effect. Valper was last seen north of Kuo. That was the piece of the puzzle that Issei was waiting for. I think I understand it. Cacabiel the warmonger from the Great War, Valper the disgraced mad scientist and stolen Excalibur fragments. Volberga laughed. You see it too? It is very obvious. Issei chuckled. It'd be a poor detective show if anyone planned it like this. Stolen Excalibur fragments in a devil's territory. Not just any devil, 2 devils who are related to the underworld government. Issei paused. He's gonna kill them and leave the fragments behind. Volberga burst out laughing. The devils will call for blood, the angels get the blame. Tensions escalate if war doesn't break outright, and then the fallen get involved. Boom, Great War revived. Volberga hysterically chuckled on the other end of the conversation. It gets even better. She said before gasps of air. Issei imagined the magician rolling on the ground from laughter. How so? The church is sending exorcists to retrieve the fragments. I can see how one international incident is preferable to a full-scale war breaking out. Got any ideas on who they are sending? Griselda Quarta. The fossil strata. Issei asked. No, just 2 unremarkable exorcists. Issei could tell that wasn't a joke. They definitely want war to break out then. Not necessarily. Too strong of a force could be seen as too aggressive to the devils. That is true. Issei agreed. But it doesn't seem like they are trying hard enough to retrieve them. Do they really think two exorcists can deal with Kakabiel, the Excalibur, and his army of minions? I don't, and they are fooling themselves if they think that. Issei pondered on that for a moment before continuing to speak. It's plausible deniability. They look like they tried but failed to stop war, and they have to fight it. Can't have the paragons of self-righteousness up there look like bloodthirsty savages, can they? They cannot. Wahlberger remarked. Got any information on these exorcists? They are both female, trained by the church. Each is from a different faction, and each has a remaining Excalibur fragment that their church gave them. Interesting. Issei nodded along. Any information on when they are due to arrive? Shortly. Their flight lands on Wednesday. I can send all the information on them if you want. Thanks Wahlberger, you're the best. Issei said, vaguely sarcastic at that. He was thankful that Wahlberger was good with technology as well, and the information she sends will save him time. You always know how to make a girl blush. She giggled out. Usual place. With that, the line disconnected. A few minutes later, an email appeared in one of Issei's email accounts. Clicking on Wahlberger's email, he opened the 3-page attachment. It was a dossier on a blue-haired girl, as the picture displayed. Issei read over her information before scrolling down. His eyes widened slightly. Irina Hyoudou. He said the name as if it was unfamiliar. He glanced at the picture. She had grown definitely, but that face was definitely that of his childhood friend. His mouth broke into a wide smile. He was genuinely happy won't be the correct word for the way he was feeling at that point. I've been meaning to thank you for making me the man I am today. I guess we'll be meeting soon that I thought. It was too easy, it really was. Issei wondered if it was a trap or something along those lines. He couldn't feel any other angelic or church-related presences nearby, but still proceeded with caution. He didn't think they were dumb enough to dress like that. Cloaks with hoods covering their heads are greatly noticeable in the crowded Kuo market. It made his job easier though, so he didn't complain. The barrier he chose to use was in place, so it wouldn't be hard to go all out. The devils would be dead soon enough as would the exorcists, so it wouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Alright, he looked around, seeing all of the people in there without a care in the world. He paused, feeling a vague sense of disgust. The veneer will soon be pulled off. Putting his hands in his pockets, a yellow magical circle appeared over the crowded shopping district. Hundreds of light spears rained down from the sky, causing people to scream out in fear. The light spears impaled the shoppers, young and old, without mercy. Those who managed to dodge the initial massacre were chased down by light spears that seemed to be able to hone in on them like a guided missile. When the screaming died down to gasps and cries for help, Issei saw the two exorcists now facing him, their swords out. Issei looked at them, their hoods now off of their heads, a small bitter smile creeping onto his face. Irina Hyoudou, Zenobia Quarta. I've been expecting you. The two stared at him, hatred and shock at his actions. Who are you? Zenobia shouted, pointing her sword at him. Issei tilted his head at the sword and then leveled his gaze at the blue-haired exorcist. My name is Issei Hyoudou. Name ring a bell Irina. He threw a quick glance at the brunette, her scrunched her eyebrows. Issei, how could you do all this? She shouted, also point her sword at the soulless boy. He saw the blue-haired exorcist shoot her friend a quick glance before leveling her sight back on the soulless boy. Issei simply shrugged. They were in the way. I wanted to talk with you personally, is that so bad? He stared down at the bodies crying out in pain near him. Raising a palm up, dozens of fireballs shot out, incinerating anyone who was still alive. The two exorcists gaped, seeing the emotionless way the boy had just killed at least 15 people. What happened to you? Are you a devil now? Issei shook his head at his former friend's words. Devils? I'm honestly offended that you think of me as so low as to become a devil. No, I'm human, a better human if I might add. Issei said, turning his head towards the direction of Kuo Academy. Now, let's get straight to the point here. I know what you are here for, you're here to retrieve the Excalibur fragments. A small, cynical smile appeared on Issei's face. But you won't make it, you're gonna die here. Kakabiel is trying to start a war with the stolen fragments by killing the two heiresses, and you won't stop him. I won't let you. He said calmly. Zenobia looks ready to tear Issei apart while Irina has an angry look on her face. What do you get from this? Why are you helping him start another war? Issei remained calm at Irina's outburst. Kakabiel's a useful idiot, but he'll be useful in the upcoming war. As for why I'm helping him, I just want to see the end of the world. He looked again at the direction of Kuo Academy and then back at the two exorcists. Both exorcists were shooting him deathly glares. I see your friend is getting a little restless, Irina. Let's get started then. Issei's face turned stoic. Fuck you, fuck the church, and fuck your god. That set her off. Zenobia charged at Issei, intent on using her sword to separate Issei's head from his shoulders. Or at least it is what she tried to do if she wasn't sliced to pieces when she dashed no more than 2 feet from her original position. Blood spouted out from her body as chunks of her flesh slid to the ground. Zenobia. Irina turned her head around so quickly that it might have given her whiplash, but at the moment, she didn't care. Issei stood in the same spot he was at, an uncaring expression on his face. Flexing the fist that was in front of him, he unfurled his fingers, and hundreds of extremely thin wires became visible to the remaining angry exorcist. You see, unlike you, I don't talk just to hear the sound of my own voice. While you were busy expelling oxygen, I was actually doing something productive. Raising up his other hand, he unfurled it, and another set of wires became visible. Irina's eyes widened as she realized that these wires had encircled her body, preventing her from moving. Issei walked up to her, not minding the hateful scowl his former friend was giving him. Don't worry, you aren't going to die now. It wouldn't be fitting of my former friend, the one who set me on the path to becoming the man I am today, to die such an undignified death. That was the last Irina heard before electricity coursed through her body. Her muscles tensed as the shock began to set in. After 3 agonizing seconds, the graceful release of unconsciousness took over. When Irina woke up, she realized that she wasn't on the ground. Her arms were outstretched to her side, her entire body resting on a piece of wood. She opened her eyes, seeing her former friend reading a book. That book looked familiar to her. Ah, you're awake. I was wondering how long it would take you, didn't want you to miss the show. Issei said calmly, closing the book and putting it on his chair. It was the book you gave me all those years ago, the Bible. It still has the funny message you wrote before you had to leave for England. She tried to speak, but couldn't. Issei simply nodded, a small grin on his face. Ah, the reason you can't talk is because I cast a spell on you. I'd normal sever your vocal cords, but time is of the essence. He remarked as the ground shook under him. Fitting, you will die like Jesus did. Bound to a wooden cross and powerless as you watch the world go to shit again. You gave it your best shot, Tiger, now watch this. A small, bubbly circle rose up from Issei's hand. The bubble held up a moving image of Kuo Academy. The exorcist could see the devils fighting a 10-winged fallen angel. You know of who they are. They won't last, but you know of that, didn't you? War is going to happen, and did you really think you two were going to stop it? Issei's face became condescendingly sweet as he read his former friend's thoughts. You two? Really, you thought you two could simply take back a bunch of stolen fragments from a cadre-level fallen angel? Do you understand how stupid you sound right now? Issei asked, watching the battle unfold on in front of him. Issei saw Valper's dead body in the background as Kiba wielded a sword. Rias, Sona, Akeno, and Tsubaki were launching magical attacks at the fallen angel, who just laughed. God is dead. Bakabiel said from the screen. Irina cried out, but no words came from her mouth. Issei simply rose his eyebrows. That's where God was the whole time. Makes sense. Issei threw an incredulous glance at the exorcist. Honestly, no, he isn't. I mean, if God was loving and all-knowing, why did he let his angels fall, his humans sin? Why did he not stop anything? It's either he left, really doesn't care, or died. Although watching 99% of humanity exist would make me want to leave or blow my brains out as well. Issei chuckled. You can believe whatever the hell you want, you're going up there soon enough. No, I'm not going to torture you. You were my friend, but more importantly, you were the one set me on this path. Issei picked up the Bible lying on his seat. Came forth 2 she-bears out of the woods and tore 42 of the youths. That's the thing that inspired me to look into magic, you know where that is from? Issei nodded. 2 Kings 2:24. One of my favorite passages regardless of it getting me where I am today. Issei looked lazily at the sky, where a massive light spear was forming. The spear was easily the size of Kuo Academy. You know, I really do think that he is compensating for something down there. Issei lazily remarked as the spear was thrown. Issei turned his attention back to the screen as a small tremor shook Kuo. When the dust settled, Kuo Academy was no more, having been reduced to rubble. The bodies of the devils littered the former school grounds. And that is how the apocalypse will start. Issei lifted a palm as a yellow magical circle appeared. A small light spear shot out, stabbing his friend in the head. A large magical circle appeared under him, but before disappearing, Issei looked at the corpse of his childhood friend. Goodbye, old friend. End of the part 2 here. So that's it for today's video, guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.